Hi everybody, and welcome back to Barry Darnall Art. I'm Barry Darnall, and this is a redo of last night. Normally I do my live streams on Thursday nights, but last night we had some technical difficulties. I think it was weather, but it looks like we've got it resolved. So tonight we're going to be doing Grizzlies on the River Redux. So to those of you who were here last night, thank you for tuning back in. I really appreciate your patience and your loyalty. And to anybody who's joining in for the first time, welcome, and I hope you enjoy what I do here. So tonight we're going to be doing a drawing of a couple of grizzly bears that are catching fish on the water. Let me pull that up. Here we go. So this is a photograph that I got from unsplash.com. The photographer is Michael Scherback. If you're looking for source material for things to draw, unsplash.com is a great place to go. There's photographers who share their work specifically so that artists can use it for their drawings, their paintings. And basically all they ask is that you give them credit, which I'm very glad to do. All right, so let's go ahead and let's jump into the drawing. I kind of laid a few things out to start with, but we will pull that up. All right, so I've got our reference photo on here. So what I've started to do on here is I've just kind of started laying in some of my landmarks. I've got where the water's coming in here. I've got the first bear right in here. And I'm kind of at this point here where I'm trying to lay in the bottom edge of the waterfall. And now I'm going to have to get in the second bear. And right now he's covered up a little bit by the reference photo, but I'll go ahead and draw him in. I'll go ahead and get rid of that reference photo every once in a while, especially when I'm working on that part of it. I'm not really worried so much at this point about getting in a lot of detail. I'm not too concerned about proportions. I just want to get things laid in here so I have something to work from, kind of a roadmap. And we're putting in my construction lines, just kind of laying things in. And I'm comparing things as I'm doing this. So I'm looking on the photograph where the nose of the bear up at the top of the waterfall, I kind of see where his nose lines up with this bear over here. And I want to make sure that I'm putting that bear in about that same spot. The other thing I want to do is I want to measure the distance between the two bears. And so what I'll do is I'll measure one of the bears, and then I'll measure that distance between the two bears. And when I do that, so for example, if I take the size of this bear that I've got here, and I put that on his nose, it should come to about not quite the middle of this bear. So it's not too far off. I'll probably have to make some adjustments. I want to finish getting some of my waterfall laid in here just so I've got some references to work with. And we're coming up here, and my water's coming down here, and I've got some water coming down in here. Okay. All right. So this is pretty much a layout of what I'm going to be doing. Let me pull away my screen here. Bear with me for just a second while I pull a couple of things up. It will take me just a second. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and just go to the main drawing. I'm going to get rid of the reference photo for a little bit here. And I apologize for that. Hey folks, if you are tuned in, I've got the chat up, and if you'd like to pop in the chat and say hello, let me know who's here. I would certainly appreciate it. If you've got any questions, any comments, please feel free to pop them in there, and I'll do my best to answer questions as they come up. All right, so I am trying to pull up my reference photo here for me to see. And I apologize for the delay here. I should have already had this pulled up. I'm going to erase some of this, and we're going to extend this out a little bit so I can get my whole bear in here more or less. There we go. All right, I've got my reference photo ready to go here so I can see what I'm drawing, which is kind of helpful for me. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I'm just going to start laying in some of the tone in here just so we can get something down on the paper. I'm not worried about trying to get a whole lot of detail in this. I just want to start laying in the tone. I want to start mapping out where some of the light and dark areas are going to be at in the drawing. All right. And a lot of this will change. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking that there's not very much detail in here, you are correct, because you don't want to put in detail first. You want to get things laid in. You want to get your main shapes and objects positioned, sort out all of the wheres and whys of things, and then you can start laying in the detail, which you'll see I'm actually doing that a little bit up here. Okay, I'm at the top of the waterfall, so I'm trying to put in here what the shape of that water is up there. I'll pull that back up, the reference photo here. So if you look up here in the top edge, you'll see that there's some small dips in the water, which is where there's just differences in the shape of the river as the water is cascading over the fall. So I'm going to start to lay that in a little bit. And now as I'm laying that in, I notice that coming off of, for example, this piece here, there's a fairly large shadow coming down, or fairly large, and I won't say a shadow, but there's a line coming down here. And I just want to go ahead and note that so that when I come back to it, I know why I put that right there, and I'll be able to relate that to it. And we'll come over here and we'll start to throw in some of this. I've got another line here that will help to define the waterfall a little bit. Now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to start working on this bear over here. Since this is kind of the main character in this drawing, he's kind of the main player, I want to go ahead and start laying in a little bit more of his detail. Okay, so that he's a little bit more pronounced, standing out a little bit better. All right, there we go. And I want to pay a little more attention now to the shapes that we're dealing with on him. I want to make sure, for example, as I'm looking where his leg lines up here with his back, I can see that right now I've actually, I guess I'm not too far off, but I think that the back should be over a little bit more, or this should maybe come back perhaps a little more. So I will grab the eraser and pull that out just to correct that some. And now we'll come in, we'll start bringing in this leg here. Now this leg here, because it's closer, is going to come down further. So I want to look at this angle between these two legs, and I'm actually going to measure that on the photograph. I'll bring my pencil back over and lay it down, and I try to keep that angle. So it tells me that the bottom of this foot probably is going to fall somewhere in this area right around in here. And I'm also looking, and I can see that this foot lines up pretty much with the hump in the bear's back here. So I know I'm somewhat on track there, and I'll just keep building this in here and putting in more and more of my detail. I want to come up here now and just show where that leg is going to come up onto his hip. And now let's come down and figure out about where his belly is at. Looks like it lines up a little bit below this joint. So we will bring this over just a little bit. It's not a very long line because of the perspective of the bear going away from us. So we'll get that in there. And now I want to get this foreleg in, okay? And that line kind of comes here. Now, this line, as I'm looking at it, okay, the bottom of this foot is actually above here. So if I draw this line across, okay, I want this leg here to only come down to about right here, okay? That keeps my proportions and my perspective where they belong. All right, we'll bring this up here. We're going to Now bring his shoulder up. Okay. Now I have to join where I'm at here with where I started off over here. So I've got to bring this down. I've got to start drawing this back in here. Okay, and I'm going to pull this across. Now he's got a shoulder coming here. This is his left shoulder actually. And then his right shoulder is coming over, and then it's coming down, and then it comes down at a fairly good angle down here, about like that. And now as I'm looking at his leg, I realize that I'm going to have to probably bring this out a little bit more, so I need to adjust. So we'll just come in here and we'll clean that up, and we will now pull this leg in here a little bit. Okay. Grizzly bears are extremely large animals. They're covered in hair, but if you look at grizzly bears, especially when they're moving, it's amazing the amount of muscle and bone that you see underneath the surface of all their fur. All right, so let's get his head in here. Now, I'm going to be drawing the head here, but I want to make sure that I'm drawing it in a fairly good proportion to the rest of his body. So I'm going to go back to my reference photo, and I'm going to measure the length of his head from the tip of his nose back to his shoulder, and then I'm going to try and find some place on his body that pretty much matches that measurement. What I found is that basically this distance here, so from here to here, is about the distance I need from here to here. So I know that the end of the bear's snout should be roughly in this area here now, okay? Excuse me. And that's important. You want to make sure that you're taking those measurements, because if you don't, you're going to end up with a bear that's got an unusually large or small head. Okay, I'm not going to worry about drawing the mouth in. I really just want to get the head in here right now, and then I can come in and flesh out the details momentarily. Now, there's a fish right here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I want to measure that fish on the reference image, and I think the next time I'm going to have to get something set up so I can show you how I'm doing my measurements, because it is important that you see what's happening. And now, as I measure the fish is basically the length from here to here on the bear. So I'm going to take that measurement. Okay, the fish's head is pretty much here in the bear's mouth, and that means that the end of the fish's body is probably going to end up about right there. Okay, so now I know that my fish is going to go in approximately this area here. I'm not going to worry too much about getting detail. That will come as I'm getting further along in the drawing. Right now I just want to get some things in place. All right, and then right in here, if you look on the reference photo, you'll see that the bear's other leg is coming in right here. All right, and that's important because that's where the water is also rushing up here to hit this leg, and then it's rushing down around this leg. Okay, so this right here is that leg in the background. I'm just going to go ahead and darken that in so that I don't mistakenly forget it at some point here. Okay, so we've got our bear here. Our primary bear is pretty well put in as far as construction and proportions. Now I need to move over and I need to start drawing on this bear here. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can move the reference photo here, and I hope this works out. It should. I'm just going to pull it down and over here to the left. Hopefully that worked. Okay, now I'm going to take my measurement from the end of this bear's nose to basically the beginning of this bear's nose. And as I look at my reference, I want to try and find a straight line. Okay, and it's probably going to put it in line with maybe the top of the bear's head. But I will come up here and I will take a measurement off of my reference photo. And I just want to go from, it's actually going to be from the tip of his nose to just the top of the bear's brow. So basically, I'm going to go from the tip of the nose to, or I'm sorry, from the top of this bear's brow over to here, okay? But I need to measure that. I've measured that, okay? Now what I want to do is I want to find something in my drawing that already exists that's comparable to what I'm trying to measure, okay? So actually what I found is that if I go from the tip of the bear's nose, so if I go from the tip of his nose to about right here, okay, that's going to give me roughly the distance I need right there. So then I come here and I put it at about the start of that bear's eyebrow, and then that brings it over to here, and I will put in a mark. So this is roughly where this bear will go. So you can see I had originally started drawing this bear over here, but the start of this bear is actually going to end up being back over here. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about with when you're drawing, especially when you're at this point in the drawing. You don't want to commit your lines. You don't want to commit too many things, you know, and say, okay, I'm positive that that's right. I'm always measuring, I'm always checking and debating with myself as to whether or not I'm actually seeing what I think I'm seeing, okay? And that's basically how you can get your drawing laid out and structured properly. Once I'm comfortable that I've got my measurements here and that everything is fairly accurate, then I can start to go in and put in the details and focus on, finishing the drawing up. But right now I want to focus on getting this bear put in place. So I know that this right here should be essentially the tip of this other bear's nose. So now I'm going to start drawing this bear, and I just want to measure the overall length of this bear. Okay, so I'm going to measure it from the tip of his nose to the very back of his rear haunch, which is the technical term for the bear's butt. And I want to measure that now against my existing bear and find a comparable distance. And what I found is from the tip of his nose to not quite the separation of the joint here. So about right there is going to be the distance, the length of this bear. So I'm going to go from here, and I want to try and keep my angle fairly close. So that's going to be about the front and the back of this bear over here. Okay. Now I want to try and get my angle. I want to make sure that my angle is fairly accurate. So I'm just going to put my pencil up against my reference. I'm going to get that angle, and I'm going to bring it over, and you can see, or hopefully you can see, that my angle is off. So this is more the angle here. So the line here really needs to be here. This is going to be more the line of the bear. That's going to be the line of the bear's body is going to be more that way from nose to his rear. Okay. Now I want to get an idea of what his height is here. I'm again going to take a measurement off of my reference photo. I'm going to find a reference over here that closely matches what I'm drawing. This one's going to be a little trickier, but I think I got it right there. So I'm going to measure from here on our bear over to here. So if I go from here to here, okay, that gives me roughly the height of my bear. Now I'm not going, where I'm putting this mark down doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the absolute height of this bear, because I'm going to have to use these as a reference again, and I want to determine where do these legs start. Okay, I can already tell that these legs are not going to start down here. They're going to start up here. All right. Again, I'm going to go over to my reference photo. I'm going to measure across from the bottom of that bear's left foot. And if I go from the bottom of the jaw over here, this is actually going to be the bottom of this bear's foot. So originally I'd put my mark there. Okay. But now I know that the height of my bear is roughly here to here. So I can put this. So that means that this bear is going to come up to roughly here, okay? So now I'm starting to get some information for what I need to draw this bear, okay? So now I'm just going to start putting in some of my marks here, okay? I'm just roughing this in, and I'm really just concerned about getting this bear drawn in, okay? So I think I must have mismeasured something because I can tell already something's a little bit off, but we'll figure it out. We will get it figured out, and we'll get this guy drawn. Okay, again, I'm just trying to get the rough shape in here so that I can make sure that I've got what I need. Now, I can see that I'm really getting off here. I'm not sure how I got off track, but we're gonna kind of pull this out, and I'm gonna give this another whirl here. That should be about where that bear's back end is at. Okay, and this line goes from the nose down here. And if I run the nose down here, this should be roughly the shoulder right in here. All right, and now I want to get the length of this bear's head. So I'm going to take another measurement from the nose to the back of his head. I'm going to find a comparable measurement on my other bear. So from here to here is basically the measurement of this bear from here to here. Okay, so this is going to be the top of this bear's head right here. And then his body pretty much comes straight across like this. I want to get a rough idea of how long that is. And that's going to be there to there. And that actually is going to be about the same length. So if I go from here to here and here to here, this is going to be roughly where the top of the bear's shoulder is at. Right here. All right. And then we'll bring this down. We're going to try and get this guy in place here a little bit. There we go. We've got some lines going in. Now he's at a slightly different angle. So he's got an ear coming off here. And then he's got another ear that is coming off in this area somewhere. We got that. And his jaw comes down from here, comes up under, and again we'll get the details sorted out as we're going. So he's got a small gap there, his front leg comes in there. All right, we're gonna bring this down. Now I know that his back curves over, and I want to bring this down to here. That's going to be about the back end of this guy, right in there. Okay, and we need to see where we're at again. So about the middle of the fish is about where that leg should be ending up at. So we're a little bit off here, but not very far. We can pull this up and out. We can come up. Okay. And then again, we've got the back leg over here. And then this leg is coming up this way and back over here on his hip. His belly is coming down here and back up. And we'll come down here. Now this foreleg here is coming down lower than this one. So we'll want to make sure that we get that proportion in place. We'll pull this up here for the front of this leg, which then brings us up into his neck. All right, and then this leg here is coming down from here, comes down not quite as low as that one. All right, so that gives us pretty much the position of this guy here. We've got some water right here that we're going to have to work with. All right, and we've got some water in here we're going to work with. There we go. All right, so now I think we've kind of got him laid in. He's kind of a odd-looking bear at the moment, but we'll get his details worked out as we work on the drawing. So now I can see that my water over here is off a little bit, so I want to try and address that. So this water actually should be coming up here, about right there, okay? And then that brings this down here. All right, so this is going to be dark up in here, and then just water coming out this way. There we go. All right, so we got our bears pretty well laid in. Let's go ahead and start getting some of these details put into these guys. All right, so we're going to come into our first bear here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to start laying in some of the shadow areas on this guy. Okay, so back here, most of the back side of this bear is in a lot of shadow. All right, so we're going to go ahead and lay in our shadow on this guy. All right. And you can see that the shadows come up to about here on his rear. All right, and then it comes down here. Now this is where we start seeing the shape of the leg comes over here. And we're going to bring this down, and we're just going to lay in this shadow, okay? The shadow is going to start to give this bear some form. It's going to start saying, okay, you know, this is the front side, this is the back side. This is where there's some light that's not getting to there. So that's going to be a ripple in his leg, you know, probably some muscle there that's showing. There's a little bit of shadow there. Now here, there's going to be the front of his leg, okay? And then under here is where his belly's at. So this is going to be in shadow, all right? And then the shadow right here that's in front of his rear leg. Now this is going to come up. This is going to show how round this bear is going around this way, okay? So up here, there is shadow up here where his hump is blocking the light from his fur, all right? And we'll get that in coming around this way. There we go. All right, now we're going to bring in this shadow here, which brings his shoulder into play, and we'll come down here. There we go. All right, we've got his rear shoulder there, and now we will bring this in. Now we're going to put in the shadow on the back of his leg, which is going to give some shape and form to him there. Now we're going to come in and start laying in some of the shadow on his head. We'll get the underside of his head here. There's the back of his jaw right in here. There's a little bit of shadow up in here where his head joins up. And you've got what appears to be one of his ears here, and you've got an ear back over here that's giving some shadow. Now his head, the muzzle is not as dark as the rest of the head. So now we're going to start putting this in. We want to start separating his head from his muzzle. Everything is kind of dark on this guy, but there's other areas. There's areas that are much darker. All right, so we'll bring this in. We know his mouth is coming up here. See, now I can come in and I can put in details like his mouth because I have a good idea of where everything else is at. All right, so we'll come in here like that. Now we'll get the head of the fish in here, and then we can bring in the rest of his mouth right in there. There we go. Now we've got pretty much his head laid in. So we've got a really good start on this guy as far as this. And now we can start laying in some of the detail on his muzzle. This is going to get a lot darker in here. I'm going to start putting some more detail on this fish so that we can define where that fish is at. We'll get his fins in here, and we will pull this in like this. We'll pull out his rear fin. We'll bring this down. He's got another small fin back here, and then he's coming in here. All right. And then his upper body is pretty much dark on the top half. Lightens up a little bit there, and then he's got a kind of a silver piece coming down here. It's a light underbelly, but part of it is a little bit darker. All right, so now we've got some of our detail in there, okay? Now let's come in here and start putting in some of our water detail, because the water is important. The water, it gives the bear a foundation that he's standing on, okay? So we've got to make sure that we've got that, because otherwise it's just a bear floating in the air. All right, so as we get this in here, we want to start to identify where those light and dark areas are at in the water. Okay, and now we got to bring this area of darkness up, okay, because it comes up to his rear foot. So the water is going around his rear foot, and then it's continuing down in here, okay? And then he's got slightly, let's darken his leg up a little bit there, so this makes a little bit more sense. Then he's got a slightly lighter area of water here that's coming between his legs. And then this piece right here, this is just white water right there, okay? So we need to really darken in this area here so that it makes sense. We're going to darken that in. There we go. All right. And now you've got the water here, which is darker than your water down here. Now I'm going to turn my pencil around. I'm actually going to start to lay in some detail of this bear's fur. Okay. I think at this point it's necessary to do that because I need to get these darks on his leg a lot darker than what they currently are. And then they're important because they really are now, that detail is necessary, and that darkness is necessary in order to give the contrast and the separation between the bear and the water. Okay, so I'm going to come in here, all right, and I'm going to get these lines darkened up a little bit. There we go. So that's looking a little bit better in there. All right, bear with me for just a second here. Okay. All right, so we'll keep on working on this. All right, so we've got him a little bit better situated here. We'll darken in this leg a little bit more in here. All right. And now we can darken up the underside of his belly. There we go. All right. So now this guy is starting to take some form. Hopefully you can tell at this point that that's a bear. I think you can. I can. All right, so we want to make note of where the white water is at here. There's a little bit more over here. Now I want to come in and start darkening up this water over here because it gets a little bit darker. Some of that is the bear's shadow. Some of that is just where the water is deeper and is darker. Okay, and I want to be able to tell that story of the water coming down off of his leg here and the shadow right in here. Okay, so we've got that. That also helps us to define what's happening here with the waterfall. Okay, you've got white water coming down here and the waterfall is coming down this way. This part of the waterfall is a little bit lower. All right, so we want to be able to show that, and then the waterfall comes back up this way. There we go. All right. And here we go. There we go. All right, so we got his leg in here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of At this point, I'm going to ignore this bear over here. Okay, I'm just going to focus on this guy because as I'm looking at it, this just isn't working out for me as much as I was hoping that it would. So we're going to adjust a little bit and we'll take this a slightly different direction. All right. So now as the water cascades over here, we can see it coming over here and we can see the water over here. All right. So this water over here is showing more contrast and detail. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to use some real loose lines in here to try and designate where that water is at. Okay. This over here is nice because it kind of provides a frame for the drawing. And then you've got a real light shadow of water coming here that comes over to where the end of the fish is at. All right. And then you've got some light shadows in here. Okay. And then all this down here is just really white water. So we're going to bring this down here. Okay. And now we're going to, again, do this in a very loose style. This water is coming down at a slightly different angle from that water. Okay. And we'll just keep coming down, putting these in. Okay. Now let's get in here and we'll throw in some more detail on this guy's head. And I realize I'm starting to run a little bit long on this. I tried to get into the drawing fairly quickly tonight. But we're going to try and bring him to a point where it's more complete. And I think we're going to call it a night. Okay. Now I'm going to focus a little bit more on the detail of his fur. Okay. Because now we're getting into trying to define some of that detail. We're trying to say, okay, this is a bear, this is fur, but I don't want to get too carried away because I don't want it to fall apart, but I need to get some texture in him. All right. So we'll do this here. Now I'm going to come up here on his shoulder and I'm going to pull in some fairly dark shadows on his shoulder. All right. Just like that. And then we will come in and we'll pull in some fairly dark shadows on his leg coming down. I'm trying to just give the impression that this is fur, and I want to use the fur to define where the shadow areas are at on this guy without losing the detail of these other shadows. We're going to come in here and we're going to really darken up this shadow. Okay, this is his fur in here. Now this here is kind of a definition of where his hump is at. So we want to go ahead and take advantage of that to define this shape. And then he's got some shadows coming down in here. All right, and we'll darken this up here since that's on the back side of this guy. All right, we'll bring this up. Now we want to really come in pretty hard on my shadows here. All right. There we go. There we go. And now I'm just going to put in a real light bit of pencil on this just to darken him up a little bit from everything else. Okay, now I want to make sure that I'm doing this in the direction of his fur at this point because I want to make sure that my lines are supporting the direction of his fur. go. All right, it's going to be a little bit darker down in here where his underside of his belly is at. This is going to be a little bit darker up in here. And this is going to be quite a bit darker in here where his leg comes up. All right. Okay, so kind of a quick sketch, maybe a little bit longer than what we planned on doing tonight. But this hopefully gives you an idea of how you go in and get started on a drawing like this. The main focus is get things laid out, and then from there you can work on putting in your larger shapes, and then work your way down into more of your detailed shapes, and just slowly build up your drawing using your shapes, and then get into your detail the further along that you get. I'm just going to put in some of the water movement in here to just try and show some of that. And there we go. So let me go back to just the drawing right here. There we go. So there is just the drawing. I think what we'll do is we will come in here and kind of wipe this guy out. There we go. All right, so I think we're going to call that a drawing, folks. I appreciate you tuning in. While I'm at it, if you would please subscribe, like, and share my channel. And if you hit the notification bell, it will let you know anytime I'm posting new videos or that I'm scheduling a live stream. So, folks, I appreciate you tuning in. I apologize for the technical difficulties last night, and hopefully that will be a one-time thing. And until next time, keep drawing, and thanks for tuning in.